to all the black gringos that comes to Brazil. I was wondering how racism is back home with you guys because I'm Brazilian and I'm black, and Brazil is racist as fuck. Oh, it isn't. Oh, Brazil is not that racist. It is. It is because I'm black, and I live here. I was born here, raised here, and it is racist as for you guys to come here and say that, oh, this place is amazing for black people. And, I was wondering how racist your place back home must be because I was like, if it's worse than here, man, I don't want to go there. I'm so sorry. I don't want to go there. I was like, my God, you guys love it here. If you guys love it here, and it's a really racist country, like people are racist. They're not like, we're not perfect, okay? They're not out there telling you racial slurs all the time, but they are racist. And I was like, you guys love it here. You guys made me think like, oh my God, back home it must be crazy. I was, that's why I'm talking in English because I just want to understand the places I don't have to go. All black Americans come to Brazil and say, oh my God, this is the best place ever to be a black person. I was like, oh God, I'm not taking that visa to go to US any because here I have to face a lot. I don't want to be out there just dealing with it. The world is racist, I know, but crazy to think that some people are getting the worst of the worst. That's insane.
Hi, lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, you're welcome to Building the Verse. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload a video, you will be the first person to be notified. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and also educate each and every one of us, you guys are the real MVP. Alright, lovelies, let's dive in today's video.
So I am not trying to say that a certain type of racism is worse than the other. Like all kind of racism hurts and all kind of racism sucks. But when I say that compared to the United States, Brazilian racism is more subtle, this is what I mean. So here in the United States, there are people building white-only communities in Arkansas and looking to expand. They say verbatim, this is a white-only, no LGBTQ people in this community, right? But a Brazilian influencer recently went viral for saying, well, if you want to move to my state, you have to accept the fact that we are of German heritage. And if you can't get down with that, you probably shouldn't come. So it's very similar messaging, but they're saying it in different ways. And if you are a person of color and you go over there, you will be most likely treated badly. Whereas in the United States, like, not to go to this town. They're telling you right now, don't come here. And in Brazil, it's like, well, I'm just saying, if you can't get down with our German, traditions, then you probably shouldn't come. Rio de Janeiro has a racism problem, a classism problem. And my entire page is about going to visit and being Brazilian, and I wouldn't be 100% honest if I wasn't honest about the issues that real people face over there. To be honest, I don't know how to talk about it because it's a sensitive topic and a lot of people will die on a hill saying that it doesn't exist, but it really does. And the kind of racism that happens over there, it's not blatant racism. It's very subtle. It's stares, it's lack of equal treatment, it's maybe somebody not offering service because of how you look like, and it's a problem. I've seen people mistreating my mom, who's a dark-skinned woman, and it's like subtle. So for example, when we go to Brazil, we always stay at the nicest hotels, not because we're rich or anything, it's just a lot more affordable over there. And there was one time where we knew where our room was, we knew where we were going, so we went from the lobby straight to the elevators. And one of the workers almost chased us down and asked, hey, can I help you? As if we didn't belong. Another instance was when I was out with her at a really nice high-end bar, a high-end club, and no one interacted with us. And it's the opposite of that warm Brazilian hospitality that everyone talks about, and I honestly think it's because of the color of her skin. I don't experience it as much because I'm like a little lighter, and colorism in Rio de Janeiro is thriving, which is sad. My brother has been also chased down in stores, and it's unexplainable, and I don't get it, and I wish it didn't exist. But I'm not trying to discourage anyone from visiting. If you look at my page, I want everyone to go visit Rio de Janeiro. My point is, you should go, which is hard to say. Because the truth is, they don't treat tourists in the same way, and it's really sad to say that they treat their own people like that. But if they know that you're a tourist, if you make it obvious that you're a tourist, they're going to treat you like a king. And that is just the truth.
Exactly. We actually have the biggest African community outside of Africa, the continent. And there's a lot of culture, and it's beautiful. And I would just want to preface by saying that I love my black color. I identify as black. I don't know if that what you say this, but yes, I love my hair, my features, and who I am today. During the adolescence, I didn't like myself, and I see this because of colorismo in Brazil. And colorismo is like when society classifies people according to the tone of skin, and the lighter you are, you got more access to the higher, fancier places, or you have more opportunities. Exactly. We actually have the biggest.
So for context, I've been living here for a month now. So I'm not an expert, but I've seen and I've saw. Now, the first thing I noticed was that this country is so racially diverse. Someone can look like they're from Sweden, someone can look like they're from Abeokuta, but they'll be from the same place. And because of that, when I came, no one was staring at me. And if you're black and you've traveled, particularly around parts of Europe and parts of Asia as well, people will stare at you. You know, they give you the look like, since when did the blacks start coming here? As far as I've experienced, that does not exist here. And so I guess the only kind of microaggression I've experienced is like the flip side of this. And basically, it's just that people don't want to believe that I'm from the UK. This has happened on 2 noticeable occasions. So the first time was actually ridiculous because we bumped into this British guy and he had a Brazilian girlfriend, but she spoke English and we were all just talking whilst we were out somewhere. And the English we were speaking was Buckingham Palace English. But this woman was there like, you guys look so Brazilian, but you guys look, are you sure? Like, you look really Brazilian. And obviously my friend and I are both, and she was, and it was just like, can you shut up? To the point where her man had to come and be like, they're literally from the UK. What are you talking about? And then the second time I had to laugh because we were out again somewhere and this woman asked where we were from. And we're like, oh yeah, we're from the UK, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, oh yeah, sure you are. Like, nah, in fact, just remembering it is too, nah. What do you mean, yeah, sure? So we just had to keep it quiet.
And when people try to pretend that race doesn't exist in countries outside of the United States, especially when we're talking about the Western Hemisphere and the Americas, this idea that there's no black and white Brazil, we're just Brazilians, is so wrong. Something that I've seen a lot in my research because I do study race in Latin America, that's what I'm doing in my PhD, right? And something that I found so common is that people will try to say, no, racism doesn't exist here in this country because we're not like the United States. Like the US is used as like the little standard for racism, when I feel like that's really fucked. Just because racism in your country doesn't present the same way as it does in the United States doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And same thing, just because race doesn't present the same way in the United States doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The biggest difference is that in the US, we promoted segregation. We wanted the really strong dividing lines between black and white, versus in various Latin American nations, they did not want that. They wanted to make it all mixed so that they can have this whole myth of racial democracy, or since we're all the same color, racism can exist, right? So yes, instead of like in the United States where we have really strong lines between black and white, you guys have a lot more middle ground. That being said, that doesn't mean that people on other sides of the spectrum don't exist and don't experience marginalization, especially the blackest people. The crazy thing is, very rarely, very, very rarely have I ever had a black person in a Latin American country tell me that racism doesn't exist. It's always someone who is not black that is telling me that. Someone who is not part of the most marginalized communities telling me that racism doesn't exist. Because every single black person I've met in a Latin American country has told me otherwise. Every single one. And just because you want to think that racism doesn't exist because it doesn't manifest the same way it does in the United States doesn't mean that it does not exist. Black people feel the impacts of racism in Latin America as well. Indigenous people also can feel the impacts of racism as well. And white people also still have privileges, and people having closer proximity to whiteness have privileges in Latin America, just like in the United States.
To all the black gringos that comes to Brazil, I was wondering how racism is back home with you guys, because I'm Brazilian and I'm black, and Brazil is racist. Oh, it isn't. Oh, Brazil is not that racist. It is. It is, because I'm black and I live here. I was born here, raised here, and it is racist. For you guys to come here and say that, oh, this place is amazing for black people. And, I was wondering how racist your place back home must be, because I was like, if it's worse than here, man, I don't want to go there.
Brazil is an extremely racist country. What you're describing is black Americans coming to Brazil and benefiting from being American. So when we are abroad, we benefit from having an American accent, American passport, and the American dollar. So our view of what actual racism is in a country like Brazil, while we can see it exists, it's very skewed because we will never be treated like a black Brazilian in Brazil because of where we're staying, what we're spending money on, and they want our money. Racism is horrible in America, but I think it's a thing where you understand the social cues, the language, and the cultural things that would tell you what racism is or what a macro or microaggression is. In Brazil, when I lived there for 6 months. I was in Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Belém, and Manaus. But my time in Rio de Janeiro was the most interesting one because that was the whitest place I lived, where it had white people, mixed people, and black people. And I stayed in a place called Leblon, which was very white, more of an upper middle class neighborhood. And I got looks every day leaving the apartment I was in. I was doing a study abroad, so I had school. But I befriended this girl, and I told her, hey, I want to go to where you hang out. I want to go to where you and your friends go. I also didn't want to be the American to go toward the favelas. That's not what I was doing. But I went to where they partied, and I had so much fun, and I felt so much more at home with black Brazilians. And we had a conversation around where I was living, and they were like, yeah, we don't go there. Why would I ever go there? And it made me realize I was living in the equivalent of the Upper East Side in New York City, and I would never live in the Upper East Side in New York City. I think America and Brazil have a unique experience because two countries that have so many black people, but they are the black people that stayed in the country of their oppressor in a way where we're the minorities in both countries, and the majority of those countries are white. I think what you're describing is something that Brazilians experience here, because if you're Brazilian with a Brazilian accent and you're exotic in America, even though you'll still be black, right? The same way I was still black in Brazil, and they didn't know I wasn't Brazilian until I opened my mouth and I spoke English. Racism sucks. I mean, racism exists around the world, and we all know this as black people. But I think Americans sometimes don't realize that we benefit from being American abroad, especially in other black places in the Caribbean and Latin America.
It does, and it's historically explained, okay? Just to make it easier, this is the Brazilian map, and we are here. I am here, actually, in Rio de Janeiro, the state, okay? This purple area is the south of Brazil. The pink area is the southeast. Here in orange is the northeast of Brazil. Here is like our kind of Midwest. I don't know, it's Midwest, the name in orange, yellow. And up here, all this green area is the north region of Brazil. It's important to explain this because down to the south of Brazil, some people, I'm not telling that everyone there, okay, they think they are Europeans. Really? Just because they're granny or their grandpa, they were from, I don't know, Poland, from Germany. They are all think they are German and Polish or French or Italian as well. But they are all Brazilian. And if you say to them, oh no, you're not German, your grandma is German, they kind of collapse. And it's a really racist area because, they think their last name is different, they're better than the rest of Brazil. But if I go there to one of these German people and talk to them in German, like, wie geht es Ihnen? Ich heiße Stella, ich bin 33 Jahre alt. They are not gonna understand me because they don't even speak the language. That's how stupid they are. But don't tell them that, okay? Some of them, not all of them, okay? In big cities like Rio and São Paulo, you can experience that, but it's, as I said, it's more subtle. It's like you notice on the way the people look at you or how they expect you to be a poor person or from the favelas, especially in Rio. If you go around, I don't know, if you're not well dressed, the security in the supermarket will follow you. The security in stores will follow you because they will think you're there to rob. In states, there are more from country Brazil. Inside the country Brazil, it's deeply rooted racism. It's normalized. They are not saying that directly to you, but they will always think that you come from a poor education or that you are there to rob. They have a terrible say that if a black person doesn't mess up in the beginning when this person arrives, this person will mess up when it leaves. They have this terrible say. It's terrible. The big cities and the capitals of each state, you see the same racism around. It's like more subtle, people thinking you are poor and security following you around, or people saying, oh, you should straight up your hair, or just take it down, and you probably won't get the same opportunities as your light skin fellows or siblings, because I have light skin, different skin colors in my own family, and the treatment changes if you are darker, not only inside your family, but in society as a whole. But it's not like in the US, like KKK and people coming up to your home and burning your house down and asking you to leave a neighborhood because you're not welcome there. It's not like that, like directly people getting on a phone like the Karens and calling the police on you. It doesn't happen that often here, but we do have a lot of police brutality, especially in the ghetto, in these areas like they're not wealthy. And as you go through the social scale, you won't see black people, that diversity of black people in those places. Like if you go to middle class, upper middle classes places such as restaurants, malls, and I don't know, bars, or even neighborhoods, you won't see a lot of diversity there. The diversity you see, and it's crystal clear, is those who are there to work and serve, and those who are there to have fun or live. And they find it really hard to understand that you are there not to serve, but to enjoy the same environment, the same place as they are. And when you're around, they know they cannot say out loud what they really want to say, because racism is a felony in Brazil. And I know they don't lose a lot, but they get this racist stamp and no one wants to get, because it affects negatively how you are seen in the society, and no one wants to be titled the racist one. But you can see clearly the separation, and it does changes from state to state. I've never been in south of Brazil. I know there are a lot of good places, beautiful places there, and some amazing people there, but I just not for me. I do a lot here in Rio. I love it here, but sometimes just exhausting. And sometimes I go to São Paulo. I love the northeast of Brazil. Never been to the north of Brazil. Want to go there someday. But I just want to save myself from this nonsense, which is dealing with racist people and people looking weird at you. I'm at an age that I don't need that.
When the Brazilian sister said Brazil is racist as fuck, it hit a nerve across the diaspora. Because here is a country often marketed as this paradise for black travelers. Samba, beaches, beautiful people, culture, or rhythm, yet behind that postcard image lies one of the most complex, deeply entrenched system of racial heritage on the planet. And she's right, Brazil is racist, but not always in the loud, obvious, in-your-face American way. Brazil racism is silent, polite, and structural. It hides behind smiles, mixed race imagery, and slogans like "We are all Brazilians." It's the kind of racism that makes you question your own eyes. The kind that denies itself while feeding off your silence. You see, after the abolition of slavery in the 1888, the last country in the Western Hemisphere to do so, Brazil never created any structural system for the social inclusion of its formerly enslaved population. Over 4 million Africans were brought to Brazil. That is more than any other country in the transatlantic slave trade. Yet today, Afro-Brazilians still face the highest unemployment, the lowest wages, and the worst access to education, healthcare, and political power. And so, when that sister says she was confused by how many black Americans called Brazil a paradise, she wasn't being hateful. She was being honest, because for her, this is not vaccination. This is a daily survival. She walks those streets, speaks that language, and faces that substitute rejection every single day. From employees who say you don't look professional, from media that glorified whiteness, and from institutions that erase black faces while claiming racial democracy. Now, let's talk about why so many black Americans do see Brazil as a refuge. Many are fleeing what they see as the unrelenting visibility of racism in America. The policy brutality, the surveillance, the constant reminders that you are not safe even in your own skin. So when they come to Brazil, they feel free. They see people who look like them everywhere. Darker skinned people in music videos, in the markets, in the streets. They can blend in. They don't feel like the only one. But what they don't see, what you can't see as a tourist, is how deeply racism hides in Brazil's social class. It's not about segregation of neighborhoods by law. It's about economics. The whiter you are, the richer you are likely to be. The darker you are, the poorer. That is not a coincidence. That is the legacy of slavery and European immigration policy that tried to whiten the population after abolition. Between 1889 and 1930, Brazil encouraged millions of Europeans to immigrants, German, Italians, Portuguese, this to dilute the African population. That is not ancient history, that was deliberate state policy. It shaped how beauty, intelligence, and success are still seen today. So when an Afro-Brazilian says this country is racist, they are not segregating. They are describing a nation that taught them to love whiteness while erasing their roots. Now let's look at the cultural disconnection happening between Afro-Brazilians and African Americans. When some black Americans visit Brazil, they see a kind of blackness that feels like politicized. Afro-Brazilians often don't identify as black in the same political way because for centuries, Brazil encouraged racial mixing while discouraging racial pride. Terms like Pardo, Monero, Mulatto, all of them were used to distance people from being called Negro. So for many Brazilians, black wasn't just a color, it was a social death sentence. And that is what shocked a lot of African Americans when they visit. They expect the same racial consciousness they grew up with in the USA. The Malcolm X type of say is loud and black and proud. But Brazil history muted that. The government literally promoted the myth of racial democracy to avoid the kind of civil rights movement America had. They say, we don't have race problems here, we are all equal. Meanwhile, Afro-Brazilians were excluded from power, denied representation, and thought to be grateful for crumbs. So when this woman said, you guys love it here, you made me think back home must be worse. She's voicing a kind of confusion rooted in a global black displacement. She's saying, if you coming from the US with all that visible racism, still think this place is paradise, then how bad must your situation be that you see my house as freedom? And that is the sad mirror we often hold up to each other across the diaspora. Each of us escaping from one version of anti-blackness into another. The plantation just changes language and scenery. Now here is what is rarely said in this conversation. Brazil doesn't have the same kind of public racial reckoning America had. There is no equivalent to the civil rights movement that forced national accountability. There is no mainstream discussion about police killing young black men, even though Brazil police killed more black people every year than the US does. In fact, Most victims of police violence in Brazil are young, poor, dark-skinned men from the favelas. But it's normalized. It dismissed as criminal control. There is no global outrage, no hashtags, no international solidarity, just silence. So imagine being a black Brazilian woman watching foreigners, especially black foreigners, come in, party and celebrate your country as a racial utopia. Why you can't even walk into a job interview without being told you are too dark or not the image we want. That is trauma wrapped in irony. Now let's talk about how the diaspora often misread each other. Black Americans have a very public, visible relationship with racism. It's confrontational, it's documented. The US loves to display its racism, from police brutality videos to political debates, but Brazilian racism is quiet. It doesn't scream, it whispers, it tells you you are included while keeping you out. That is why some Americans miss it. They are used to seeing racism wear a badge and a gun. They are not trained to see it wear a smile. And yet, both systems lead to the same outcome: black pain, poverty, and premature death. This is why Pan-African understanding is so important, because whether it's a favela in Rio, a hood in Chicago, or a township in the Johannesburg, the machinery is the same. Why supremacy operating under different accents? Now, to understand how racism works in Brazil, you have to look at culture, look at television. For example, turn on a Brazilian telenovela. Most of the actors are white or light-skinned. Black characters, when they appear, are maids, drivers, criminals, or comic relief. Brazil sells itself as a multicultural nation, but its media looks like a Portugal with a tan. And yet, Brazil culture, music, dance, language, spirituality comes from blackness, from Africa, from the Yoruba, from the Bantu, from the Fo, from the Ewe, from enslaved Africans who built this nation's souls. Every reading from Semba to Capoeira is African in origin. The contradiction is staggering. A country that consumes blackness but denies black people. Now imagine being a black American, seeing all that, seeing people who look like you everywhere, hearing Afro rhythms on every street. You might think, wow, this is freedom. But that is surface level. You are seeing black culture without black power. And that is what the Brazilian sister was trying to say. She wasn't trying to insult anyone. She was trying to warn us. She was saying, don't mistake visibility for equality. Don't confuse being surrounded by blackness with being protected by it. Brazil is a reminder that you can have black culture without black liberation. Let's go deeper. The myth of racial democracy was one of the most successful lies of the 20th century. It told the world that Brazil has somehow solved racism through mixing. But what it really did was create confusion. It made race hard to name, so inequality could never be challenged. Because if you can't even say you are being discriminated against, how can you fight it? In Brazil, even the word black, Negro, carries a history of shame. Many Afro-Brazilians didn't claim it until recently, thanks to movements like Movimento Negro that fought for racial consciousness. The older generations often use color equilism. Morona, parade, calf, lente, anything but black. That is internalized colonization. And it's important to recognize how European colonization used to different strategy in different places. In America, segregation was visible. In Brazil, it was psychological, but both kept the same structure: whiteness at the top, blackness at the bottom. So when black American praises Brazil, they are reacting to the illusion of freedom. The illusion that because everyone dances together, eats together, and sleeps together, racism must not exist. But as the sister said, just because they are not calling you racial slur doesn't mean they see you as equal. Now let's talk about the economics of this illusion. Tourism plays a big role. Brazil tourism industry sells the image of mixed race sensuality, the exotic black woman, the beautiful brown people, the friendly locals. That's how racism hides, through fertilization. It romanticizes blackness while dehumanizing real black people. And here's the cruel part. Many Afro-Brazilians participate in that same image making because it's survival. You have to perform acceptance to be employable. You have to smile through microaggression to pay rent. That is not equality, that is endurance. Now, what does this conversation mean for the diaspora as a whole? It means we have to stop romanticizing each other's countries based on surface impression. Every black society carries its own wounds, its own history of survival. Black Americans have police brutality. Afro-Brazilians have economic exclusion. Africans in continents face neo-colonial exploitation, different tactics, same system. Instead of comparing who has it worse, we should be asking who profits from all of us being divided and confused. Because when a Brazilian woman says Brazil is racist, and an American woman says no, it's not that bad, that is not just disagreement, that is disconnection. That is centuries of colonization teaching us to mistrust each other's pen. The goal should not be compelled in suffering. The goal should be to connect and understanding. Because what she said, if your place is worse than here, I don't want to go there. That is not a statement of pride, that is a cry of exhaustion. She tried to racism being global. She tired of running from one form of oppression only to find another. And maybe that is the real message. There is no safe country for blackness, only safer moments. What we need is not another escape, but a foundation, a Pan-African consciousness that says no matter where we live, America, Brazil, Nigeria, the UK, the Caribbean, we recognize each other's struggle as one. Because until black people can move anywhere on this planet and not be seen as less than human, none of us are truly free.
And if you have watched up to this extent, thank you so much for all the love and support. Don't forget to please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. Alright, lovely. See you when I upload the next video.